What's up, Canes fans? Welcome to the Canes Insight Daily Podcast, powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Little news happened over the weekend. Miami has its new defensive coordinator in Coach Corey Hetherman, coming from Minnesota. Top 10 defense, a lot to dig into. I think on paper, you can't be any happier about what you see from Corey Hetherman. We'll see how it all plays out. He's talking to my media right now. We'll give you some snippets from that press conference, but a lot to dive into. All offseason, we heard. Doesn't matter till we get a DC. Doesn't matter till we get a quarterback. Well, now those boxes are checked, so it's officially time to get ready for the 2025 season, starting with spring, which is just around the corner. Doesn't feel like it, but it'll come up quick. So first, I want to talk about some folks that you don't have to have those same question marks. That is Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. Dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anajar and Levine. Pete, hop in.
Good afternoon, D.
Yes, sir. It's a little late today, but wanted to make sure we saw the presser, saw what these guys had to say. Interesting tidbits here in Morrow talking about Cam Ward, Carson Beck, Hetherman, a lot of the usual stuff that every D coordinator says about being an aggressive defense and attacking defense and all that. But look, this is a guy with the tape backs it up and the results back it up at multiple spots. So a lot of reasons to be excited about Miami's new defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and it took a few days to kind of do a little research, watch some stuff, ask some people about him. The first thing is obviously his demeanor to me, D, when you talk about Corey Hetherman. And I had asked a couple NFL people if they were familiar with him, didn't really know him personally. But then after I had asked that, one of the guys I was talking to actually started sending me clips of him and saying, I like this guy. So that was just a personal anecdote in terms of asking people about him. And then just some stuff I watched Curt Cignetti talking about him from his time at James Madison. And he was talking about how he kind of found out about him or hired him. He said, look, I knew about him when he was at Maine. We played Maine, and his demeanor on the sidelines, the way he walked around, was really impressive. Then he was telling a story about how they had just won a game 68-10. And he said 20 minutes later, he's pissed off in the coach's film room already. Everyone's in the locker room celebrating, and he's right back to work. So these are just things that are nothing but positive to me. I don't think that some of the stuff we saw last year in press conferences and things of that nature will necessarily be happening. I think he's a very serious guy, and I think that's something that Mario jives with, and that's the way that Mario is about this whole thing. You can say what you want about Mario and his coaching abilities, but man, when you talk about someone who is really serious about what he does, and he's not going to do the social media stuff that we've seen from previous staffs and get everyone all excited to then not see it. Like, he's going to make what he thinks are the right changes, and he's going to bring in people that are very serious about what happens on the field. Not to say that other people aren't serious, right? But you can see that with this guy.
Yeah, by the way, if you saw me typing, Pete, I got a message. Shout out to Ranger Granger. What a awesome supporter on CanesInsight.com. He was asking me, he's like, hey, I saw your guys' faces on another channel. Are they stealing your content? Should I report them? That was actually Group Chat Sports, which is another thing we're doing. More college football oriented besides the Canes, transactions, portal, recruiting, coaching changes, everything else. So please like and subscribe. We're over 1,000 subscribers as of this morning. So I appreciate everybody's support. And Ranger Granger, thanks for having our back. But that was us, not a fake D-Money and Pete impersonating. So on Hetherman, just some key stats here, because look, we've seen every defensive coordinator press conference. They always say the same things. It's not their, I'm not saying it's a negative to Hetherman. That's just the way this goes with the good ones, the bad ones. It's just how it goes. But here's the important stuff. So statistics, I use teamrankings.com. This is only FBS stats, meaning if Miami plays Bethune-Cookman, that stat's not included, but all the FBS games are. So Minnesota last year, 10th in scoring defense. Remember, this is Big Ten. This is the best conference in the country right now. I think we could safely say that right now, from what I've seen, Big Ten over SEC all day. Scoring defense, 10th in the country. Pass defense, 11th in the country. Pretty good number after what we saw last year with the Canes. Run defense, 11th in the country. Yards per game, 7th. Third down, not as good, 68 in the country in third down percentage. Red zone TD percentage, 34. So they're pretty good at keeping guys out of the end zone. Opponents' yards per play, which I like more than total yards because it adjusts for pace and things like that. 14th in the country in opponent yards per play. Opponent yards per rush, 20th. Opponents' first downs per game, 11th. Sack percentage, which is the percentage of the opposing team's dropbacks that result in sacks, 39th, right? So Miami was actually a better pass rushing team than Minnesota last year, but Minnesota was sound and didn't allow as much yards in the air. And, some other stats, but really those to me are the key ones that show what he was able to do statistically. Watching Minnesota, again, I dove into a couple games. The main takeaways were you didn't see guys pointing at each other going nuts before the snap. That was pretty obvious, especially when you've watched so much Miami tape and watched so many Miami games to see motion and things happen. I think Roman made a joke about it on his breakdown as well for student of the game. It's like to see motion and see movement and the players not all point to each other and go insane. That was eye-catching. Just consistency, running to the ball, tackling, the way they play. This is something that when you talk to people that are more deep in the game, college coaches, they talk less about X's O's and more about, hey, when I turn this tape on, is this a defense that plays hard? Is this a defense that runs to the ball? Is this a defense that knocks the other team back? Things like that are really what a lot of the real college coaches look at before they even talk about X's and O's. So that's something I think that's important to know with Minnesota is that they did run to the ball. I think, and they were disciplined. They communicated clearly. They weren't going insane when something was picture changed on them. And they were sound, right? Nothing crazy, nothing like with Manny. He had very unique exotic blitzes, nothing like that. Just a good sound football and a team that was on the same page. One thing that talking to people is something to watch. Maine, James Madison, Minnesota, you'll get better players at the University of Miami, but it's a different type of player, right? This college football is a regional game. There is something to culture fit and things like that. So the question for Hetherman is coming down to Miami, will he be able to adapt to this roster, this group of kids? I'm confident he will. He's been at multiple spots, Maine, James Madison, Minnesota had consistent performance. That's one thing I love about his resume, that he's built great defenses at different levels, at different spots. But the Southeast is a different animal. Even South Florida is a different animal. So that doesn't mean you hire a South Florida guy necessarily at all. It's just about, can he adapt to what's here? I think he can. Hopefully he can, I should say. And on paper, resume-wise, and just talking to people around the country, seeing reactions from people around the country, this is close to a home run on paper as you can get.
Yeah, you mentioned the adjustment culturally and dealing with the type of guys that'll be at Miami. He's coming from a program that's very disciplined in Minnesota. Discipline defensively is something that you're looking for to be upgraded big time with him. And he's got to ingrain that in these guys, right? Can he do that? Is that an overall program thing? Obviously, Mario wants to continue working towards that, but in terms of the penalties and stuff like that, still needs to be cleaned up. You talked about the adjustment, and I was watching an interview with him. He talked about when he played in Europe, he got brought in like 4 weeks into the season in Austria. I think he said it was Austria and Germany were the two places he played. And they were 0-4. He ends up playing quarterback, and then the entire coaching staff leaves, and he has to start calling plays as well as, being the quarterback of the team. So he was a player coach, but he said, I had to, it was a language barrier. I got brought in mid-season. So maybe the Spanish might be a little tougher than German, but it's cool to see these past experiences that he has. Again, doing some of this research, I suggest you guys look up, just search Corey Hetherman interview, and a lot of this stuff is out there on YouTube, but has been in a lot of places, man. I mean, he was doing an interview when he was at Rutgers, and he was talking about how he's been 9 different stops, right? Springfield College, he talked about. So worked his way up, is a grinder. People in the comments said it. Worked for Greg Schiano. Definitely, I'm sure Mario and him spoke and he gave him a good referral. The results are good. Can it translate here? Remains to be seen, but agreed. And a lot of comments about him as a recruiter, questions. I think everything you hear is teacher, right, D? I think he's a guy who's there to really teach these guys, develop these guys, coach these guys. You look at the offensive side of the ball, Shannon Dawson is not doing all too much recruiting. The work speaks for itself, at least this year, right? Especially some of these guys, because transfer portal is recruiting to me. It's the same thing. Just because they're not high school guys doesn't mean you don't have to recruit them hard out of the portal. Those battles are tougher to win sometimes because you know what you have. So to me, I think it's going to be something similar on that side of the ball. We'll see if he brings someone with him. A lot of Nick Monroe questions, comments, guy who's a very, very top level recruiter that we've heard about for years. But we'll see what happens with the staff. I expect it to kind of be what it looks like on the offensive side of the ball, though, in terms of him overseeing it and really doing a lot of the coaching, and then the staff underneath will be doing a lot of the recruiting work there.
Yeah. So, the question here, or comment from H. Keynes I wanted to get to, which is the interesting thing is he just signed an extension with Minnesota. Mario wanted him enough for the $600,000 buyout and the over $1 million in salary. He really wanted him. That definitely is true. It shows Miami still has money to pay these guys. Mario used the term rising star to describe Hetherman. I don't think that's out of line with what you hear nationally when people talk about him. Watching stuff on Hetherman, it's the things you hear a lot repeated. Teacher, like you said, he prides himself as a teacher first. You know, 4-man front, schematically, nothing too crazy there that looks jarringly different. Watching Minnesota, I did see less of the games on the defensive line than maybe you had here, but nothing totally, you would just, to the naked eye, you'd say, wow, this is hugely different. But you hear him talk about being simple, making it simple for the players, alignment. He talks about it. You see it on film that they are, proper. They're lining up the right way. They're communicating and they're tackling and they're running to the ball. They're kind of the basics there, which he stresses every time you hear him talk. He also talks about learning your personnel and how important that is. He's been at different places, had success at different places, learning what you have and what they do well. And that's the most important thing if you're putting them in a position to be successful. Of course, Miami didn't play well on defense. They have a lot of highly rated players on defense, a lot of highly rated players coming in, right? Either transfer portal guys, high school guys, or guys that are coming, entering their second year, didn't play as much as freshmen. So not just the guys you see on tape with the defensive struggle, but also the new wave, seeing what they do well, looking at them with fresh eyes, and then putting them in a position to be successful. I love the fact that you have so much young talent on defense on paper. Now, there's a bad defense last year. So I say young talent, I mean highly rated guys that other schools wanted, physically talented guys, where he's providing a fresh look at them, seeing what he likes, who fits, who plays the way he wants to play, and then fitting the defense to what those guys do. So that's going to be interesting in spring with so many young players returning. You didn't lose a ton of young defensive players to the portal. There have been rumors about pretty much any 5-star or 4-star defensive player that Miami had last year. You didn't lose a lot of those guys, barely any, to the portal. So those guys are all going to get a chance to show what they can do along with the transfers, along with some returning starters. So I'm curious to see who gets their playing time elevated with Hetherman in charge. That's always something interesting to watch with new coordinators.
Yeah, different guys fit different schemes better, and coaches take liking to them. You see this tweet here. It says, Canes DC Corey Hetherman on the process of learning the roster in the ACC, which is what you were talking about. D said, number one, it's going to be all about us. I want to learn the roster. I want to learn who the guys are, seeing the guys on film. I'm excited about a lot of the things you see on tape. So,
and look, defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, oftentimes they can be a scapegoat for a system that's just not working, right? Top down. However, we have seen in the past 8 years, 10 years, monumental changes from one year to the next with a coordinator change. I'll give you an example here. So, in 2015, Miami was 84th in the nation in scoring defense. This is D'Onofrio's last year. The year they got blown up by Clemson, the year Golden got fired midseason. 30.5 points per game allowed, 84th in the country in scoring defense. Next year, and this is without the portal bringing in a ton of new players, The very next year, Manny Diaz takes over. Miami's 13th in the nation in scoring defense, 19.8 points per game. So go from the 80s to 13th, go from the 30s to 19. That's 1 year without the portal to bring in a whole new set of players. That shows you how quickly this thing can turn around. I'll give you another example, right? We always talk about the impact Cam Ward had on the offense, and that's fair. But look at Shannon Dawson 1 year to the next without Cam Ward. So Miami, this is Mario's first year with Josh Gaddis, 114th in scoring offense, 19.4 points per game. The next year with Shannon Dawson, and this was without Cam Ward, Miami jumps to 38th in the nation. So from the 110s to 38th, 30 points per game from 19. So again, this is just year to year with a quarterback change and without like monumental personnel changes. Now I know with Shannon Dawson, the offensive line did get better year 1 to year 2, but that's a major, major jump. So a coordinator change, yes, maybe sometimes the one coordinator gets blamed for too many problems when there's other problems in the program. But if the right coordinator change is made, you could see significant jumps. And this particular coordinator change is coming with multiple additions through the transfer portal and defensive backfield, whether you're talking about, Zechariah Poyser, Charles Brantley, Ethan O'Connor, Emmanuel Carnley. These are major additions. Potentially you add an Xavier Lucas. So that position's been remade in the portal with big money, guys that were targeted by all the top programs, including Georgia. You have a premier defensive coordinator, young defensive coordinator from a top 10 defense. So on paper, to project a major leap in defensive production, I don't think it's just being a homer. We've seen it happen before with even less personnel being added.
And, a couple more things to note here. Minnesota fans were pretty upset that he's gone, right? Especially since he just did sign that extension, but not so much upset like, man, yes, they're upset he had just signed the extension, but they're upset that they were losing a good coach from their perspective. There's a tweet here from Tony Liebert that just came out about 10 minutes ago here. He's a writer for the Minnesota SI website. He said, if Corey Hetherman hadn't left for Miami, I imagine he would have been a top candidate for the now open Penn State DC job. The timing of the coaching carousel always plays a big factor.
Yep. We got a younger guy. Obviously, they got more of a proven guy, meaning Clemson getting Tom Allen from Penn State, former head coach in Indiana. They got more of a proven defensive coordinator. Miami getting what Mario Cristobal calls a future star. And I like the profile. I mean, look, again, this is all on paper, but the profile to do it at a small school level at multiple stops, and then to go to the Big Ten, the best conference in America this year, and then do it there. Proven production as a coach, different places you're doing it at, and different levels you're doing it at. So that's all positive. You saw a guy like Cignetti. Remember his famous press conference? He said, all I do is win. Of course, Cignetti coached with Hetherman back at James Madison when they had a top-ranked defense. But Cignetti says, Google me, all I do is win. Of course, if you Google Cignetti, when he made that statement, it was all different spots, but not the Big Ten level. Goes to the Big Ten, has success. So, there's something to doing it repeatedly and consistently at different spots, regardless of the level. That means you find a way to get it done. Different challenge here in the ACC. Not as tough of a conference as the Big Ten, but personnel's different. New environment. And look, the ACC does have some good offense, right? I mean, Clemson can play offense. SMU can play offense. Louisville. And then you have the teams on Miami's schedule that are out of conference with the Notre Dame, the opening game, which again, kind of unique offense, but you better stop that running game. And of course, Florida, who knows what DJ Lagway will do. They've added a ton there. So there'll be plenty of challenges on the schedule for Hetherman, but I think overall the conference not as strong as what he just left.
Question here from Alex Vell 30, and a couple other people had asked this as well. Josh Pate mentioned pace of our offense being much faster than what Hetherman has seen at prior stops. I think that's overblown. Agree.
Yeah, were we that fast paced this year? It wasn't like we were with Lashley, I thought. I mean, we had a lot of plays per game. I want to say we were 22nd in plays per game as an offense, but I don't think that was because we had a fast pace. I think that's because we were number one in third down conversions. So we just had
a lot
the ball.
Of plays we were letting the clock run down. We were getting to the line and letting it run a bit.
Yeah. So, maybe someone can help me in the chat to find a true stat that measures pace of play. because I'd love to see that. But, plays per game is often a stat used to reflect pace of play, but that can be deceptive because, again, Miami was so good on third down, number one in the country by far, that they ran a lot of plays because they kept converting third downs. And that really, to me, that's not a bad thing for a defense. It's actually pretty good, right? Because your defense is not on the field. And in fact, let me check up time of possession just because someone brought up this point. So in terms of time of possession, average time of possession here, Miami is 14th in the nation, right? So if you're 14th in the nation in time of possession because your offense is so good, that to me helps your defense quite a bit. Now, of course, Cam Ward gone, you're losing on offense, but you do have a veteran quarterback in Carson Beck. You do have that offensive line. Your running game should still be pretty good. So you'd hope that third down ability stays with the offense at least a little bit. And I think that will benefit the defense. No question.
Canes Cats Heat 305 asking, did they have the press conference already? Yes, they did.
Yep. And nothing crazy from what I could see from Hetherman, just some quotes. Again, this is the normal stuff you hear from defensive coordinators. It's not a negative or a positive. It's just the stuff you usually hear. I want to be the most physical team. We want to be a physical football team. We want to play fast. I want our guys to be technique sound before getting to X's and O's, which I like that approach because I don't think we need to be outsmarting everybody there. I want them to know it well enough that they can teach it to others and the younger guys. It's all about us. I want to learn the roster. I want to learn who the guys are, seeing the guys in film. I'm excited about what you see on tape. Teaching, want to make sure guys understand the why of why we're doing things. Want to make sure guys are technique sound, fundamentally sound. I want them to communicate. Again, kind of the usual stuff. We'll be an aggressive defense, an attacking defense. And the reason that, to me, this is the most important thing, Pete, before you take over. The reason he came to Miami, the opportunity to win a national championship. You do hear coaches say this about Miami, that, look, Minnesota's won national championships before, but that was, I believe, before World War I. So when you say
it feels like that long for us,
it really does. Kind of look, I looked like one of those World War I guys in the trenches when I did that Carson Beck bit that we keep using on Instagram before we knew who our quarterback was going to be. We were in the trenches and it was dicey, man, not knowing what the quarterback situation was going to be. It wasn't a smooth ride. So I was looking pretty haggard. I was looking like a shell-shocked World War I vet at that point in the Battle of Verdun, looking all shook up. But luckily that worked out. Feel back to myself now. And now the defensive coordinator hires is pretty good. But yeah, so the point is, I did a little weave there. Minnesota, they probably don't have a chance to win the national championship, if we're being honest. So with the University of Miami, 2001, 5 championships since 1983. I believe that's the most besides Alabama. So in this guy's lifetime, no one's won more national championships than Miami. Feels like a long time ago, but it's a proven method. Of course, you were in the mix this year, right? Miami played defense a lot like Minnesota played defense. We might still be talking about Miami playing. So the chance to win a national championship is not as hypothetical here at the University of Miami. So look, he got paid a lot. That helps. But I do believe when he says he came to Miami to win a national championship, he's being sincere.
I'll say this. I agree. Minnesota's a tough place to go win a title at, but I would have said the same thing about Indiana before this season, and they were in the mix. They're in the playoff. You're in the mix. To me.
Look, Miami was right there in that border too. So,
comment here from New King God, who always appreciate the support from him. Says, "I'm tired of the rising star BS. This better work out, Mario. I wanted someone with experience." Now, look, I'm not completely disagreeing with you. He's not the most experienced in terms of having called plays at the FBS level, right? He's only done it for 1 year. I will say that sometimes having all the experience in the world isn't the best thing either, as Kevin Steele was the DC the first year here with Mario, and that experiment didn't really work out.
Yeah, his experience was huge. And look, Hetherman has experience. He's just young with experience. He was running the defense in Maine, running the defense at James Madison, and those were both exceptional teams. So that to me is quality experience. And in some ways it's even better because you have to make it work. Like, Tom Allen, right, who Clemson just hired. This may have turned out to be a phenomenal hire for Clemson. But, Penn State, we all saw their defense, man. I could have coordinated that defense, right? They have just players all over the place. They'd been playing good defense under Manny Diaz right until this year. So it's not like they're trying to get the talent out of him. They'd been playing well. So a guy like Allen with a ton of experience came in there and just kept the thing afloat. But to me, the experience of having to go to Maine, having to go to James Madison, making it work with pieces that are not NFL across the board. Yes, the competition's not NFL either, but you still got to make it work with those guys. And then going to Minnesota and then repeating the success, that's a track record. So we're not talking about some hotshot defensive coordinator or linebacker coach, right? Or safeties coach. That's a good recruiter and never called plays. This guy's been a defensive coordinator at every single level. And this is just an extension of what he's been doing. So experience, to me, I get it, but this is not someone that you're saying, hey, this is a rising star, DB coach that we're allowing to call plays here. That's not that.
Our buddy H. Canes 100 says Minnesota was giving him more than $1 million to stay at DC. That right there should say something about the guy. And look, I don't want to go on like a full-fledged rant here, D, but it does kind of lead me to want to say one thing about something that I've seen the last few days here, like a common sentiment, is because we can't have it both ways. We've seen the reports of what Carson Beck is making. I see some people saying, well, why are they paying this guy all this money? Right. But then we've heard for weeks, some people saying, well, Miami must not have money anymore. And then they're also willing to have to pay Minnesota to go get Hetherman and then pay him a nice salary as well. So I don't know, just something I've noticed.
Yep. Listen, this is a big money move. So that's always a good sign, separated from the results, that you have the ability to do that. You don't know if it's going to work out or not, but the ability to take coaches that are having success with money is big.
Right.
So a couple comments here. Johnny Lagoon, our boy. I was an undergrad at a CAA school, and Hetherman was coaching at Maine JMU, similar to Big Ten defensive style. Look, that style's winning. I mean, look what's in the college football playoff. Look what's in the championship. So I don't think we're going to play that way on offense, although we will run the ball. But I think we could use toughness. And by the way, I think we could get more of those kind of guys, maybe an elevated talent level, but you don't have to have. Look, I'd love to have what Ohio State and Penn State have on defense, where everybody's a first rounder. That is what Miami's been known for. But if you can't have that right away, at least, some guys that are going to be tough, physical, nowhere to be, and productive, they might have some athletic limitations. Maybe we need more of those guys. We'll see what happens when he assesses our roster, but it might be he says, look, we need more guys that are similar to what I had in Minnesota. Not a whole roster of them, because you do want that first round talent. Minnesota has a couple guys, but maybe we need more guys that just get the job done among our talented players. They were number 10 in the country at a P4 school, at a Big Ten school. So it's not like they were struggling. And, they went against Penn State. They stopped those running backs. They were our elite running backs, just announced they're coming back to school. So he's gone against real talent. This is not a G5 coordinator that's never gone against real talent. He's been at other levels, then he goes to the Big Ten level, and he's gone against real athletes and real players. Yes, it's more of a run-based style, but he's gone against, how many receivers have gone drafted from the Big Ten the last few years, right? Some pretty good ones. That's on Nico Collins out there, Ohio State's receivers. There's been some really good receivers in that conference, good running backs.
Jahan Dotson.
Right. So it's not like there's no receivers in the Big Ten that you got to deal with.
Alex Vell asking about Mesidor, if he's running it back. And yes, that was announced earlier today, officially, that he'd be coming back, which is a really, really big get for this team. And D, this is something that we've been hinting at for a while. So if you've been watching the show, you probably already knew that was happening.
And it's going to really, to me, help Hetherman. Again, we'll see what Hetherman likes and doesn't like about our personnel. But when you have a guy like Mesidor, who has a ton of snaps, right? He's been injured, but even with the injury, he's had a ton of snaps. Let's just pulling up Mesidor. I'll pull up Mesidor stats here. But this is a guy who's been productive. He took one for the team really last year playing inside. That's not his game. He played defensive tackle pretty much all year because Miami was young there. He's really not a defensive tackle. He's only 280 pounds. He's best on the edge. So, but just looking at some of his stats over the years, this goes back to his time in West Virginia, entering his sixth year of college football, which is crazy. Just the experience this guy's going to have. But you're talking about 23 sacks career, 36 tackles for loss career, 145 tackles. So the experience, the physical maturity, the versatility, although you probably want him more on the edge, especially when you play a team like Notre Dame, and they're going to be trying to pound those edges with their big offensive tackles, Jeremiah Love. If you have a Ruben Bane, Messidor, you're much stouter against a team like that without totally giving up your pass rush.
This comment from our boy Kevin Clark at ESPN. He replied to our tweet earlier about Hakeem Messidor saying he'd be returning. He said, "Wow, our corner room is going to be special, Messidor Island."
And we'll see, how much Hetherman wants to be dropping his defensive ends into coverage. And look, we always joke about that because when it goes wrong, it's frustrating. There's very good defenses in all levels of football, particularly in the NFL and the higher level college, where you'll see those guys drop. I mean, that's part, you want to show different looks to your quarterbacks. But every time I've heard Hetherman talk, he's said simple. I've actually heard him say multiple, even though I know they are multiple at times. But he said simple, 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 and I think that helps. One difference I would say between Manny and Hetherman is Manny's much more about making negative plays, tackles for loss. This was not a big tackle for loss team this past year, Minnesota. I'll pull up the stats here, but Minnesota was not like a top 50 team in tackles for loss. So I think that's something to keep an eye on because here we go. So tackles for loss, Minnesota this year. Yeah, just give me 1 second. So yeah, tackles for loss, Minnesota is 83rd in tackles for loss. Miami was 34th. So this is a stat that Miami actually wasn't that bad in making plays behind the line of scrimmage, but they allowed a ton of explosive plays. Minnesota didn't have as many negative plays behind the line of scrimmage, or they didn't have as many just backbreaking explosive plays. And I think that is a major differentiator between what was happening up there and what was happening down here. So Manny, the big change from Manny, among many changes from Manny and D'Onofrio, was Manny really wanted these guys getting on the offensive side of the line of scrimmage, making plays in the backfield with the defensive linemen, with the linebackers, just making those negative plays and killing drives that way. That was an emphasis for Manny. He was always top 10 in tackles for loss. This is a little bit different, but don't mistake tackles for loss with aggressiveness and good defense. They don't give you championships for tackles for loss titles. They give you championships for playing good defense, running the ball, scoring points, and winning games. And I think that's something at Minnesota you saw on defense at least. And if you took that Minnesota defense and plunked it to the ACC and played with our offense, we probably would have been still playing football, or at least, playing deep in there. I don't see an offense like ours in the playoff. That's another thing I want to talk about, Pete, just playoff in general. I want to switch to Hayden Lowe in a second, but I want to get your takeaways on the playoff from a Miami perspective, because when I watch the games, number one, obviously, the two best defenses in the country are Ohio State and Notre Dame. They're still playing football. That's the number one obvious thing. The importance of the running game, the ability to run the football and stop the run, critical like it was 100 years ago, still very important. But the one thing I'll say is, for many, many years, we would watch football on this time of year in January, and you'd say, man,
there's not that many teams on that level.
Well, there's none, I don't think. Maybe Ohio State on a good day, but I don't see any of those teams with layers of five-star talent and the depth that you had pre-portal, pre-NIL of those old Alabama and Georgia teams. Not even that old, a few years ago. But beyond that, I remember watching the offensive lines and the running games for those teams and being like, man, they are so much bigger than us up front.
Right.
They are so much more powerful running the ball than we are falling forward. There's just a man-sized component to their offense that we didn't have. That is one area that I got to say, I think Miami's bridged the gap.
And it's not just Miami. I think, like, in general, there was only like 2 to 4, 5 teams that looked like that in college football. It's way more spread out now across the board, but the trenches, it's way more like under the microscope because there's not as big of a gap as there used to be. But for sure with Miami, I think still the interior D-line, if we're being honest.
Oh, defense is a whole different story. Defense.
I'm talking. We're talking on both sides of the line. Offensive line. No, Miami's there. Offensive line wise.
That's what I was getting. Yeah,
defensive line,
Ohio
we
State's
we
defense.
still have a ways to go there.
When you look at Ohio State and Penn State's defense, forget the ability to play football. Obviously, those are two top 5 defenses. Notre Dame and Ohio State literally 1 and 2, and they're the 2 best teams in the country according to the playoff. So that's night and day. First rounders, NFL draft talent on that side of the ball, night and day. Still. But I would say offensive line, I think when I watch these teams, and then I watch Carson Beck's Georgia film from this year, I'm saying, man, if there's a better offensive line than ours, I haven't really seen it. I think Texas was overrated all year on the offensive line. I would say hands down we have a better offensive line than Texas. LSU was supposed to be a good offensive line. Florida pushed them around like nothing. Oregon, kind of a paper tiger. Ohio State injured but good. Notre Dame really good. That's probably the other one that kind of I would put on the same level as Miami's. But right. I gotta say, like, just from a power running and offensive line standpoint, I think Miami actually is as good as any team in the country based on what I've seen in the playoffs. The fall off is, and it's a big fall off, is defensive talent and then defensive execution. 2 different things. With both areas, Miami is not where these other teams are. Yeah. Quarterback way better, by the way. We didn't talk about quarterback compared Riley Leonard, Will Howard, Drew Aller, who else is in there? Quinn Ewers. I mean, Cam Ward's is 3 levels above these guys. Carson Beck, definitely on the same level at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think as good as Restrepo was, having that guy who's like an absolute game changer, receiver, game breaker, I should say, because Restrepo was a game changer with a lot of stuff he did, but like someone who absolutely put fear in the defense, who could score anytime he was on the field.
Jeremiah Smith's in a class of his own, but if I said, okay, Pete, I'm going to put Restrepo on Notre Dame, is he not their best receiver by far?
Yeah.
If you put Restrepo on Penn State, is he not their best receiver by far?
I'm not saying he can't. I'm not saying he's not of that caliber. It's just in terms of game planning. If you're a defense, it's.
And I would say, look, would you rather have an Isaiah Bond who can't stretch the field or Restrepo for the college game? I understand pros is different. You have a lot of guys you can choose from, but I mean, Restrepo versus Isaiah Bond, I'm taking in college Restrepo a million times out of a million. Isaiah Bond's jumping for passes at his belly button. So, I mean, Restrepo doesn't do stuff like that. Restrepo's catching passes on his back. I think that used to be the case, Pete, where you would go to these playoff games and you'd be like, man, these receivers, holy moly, like LSU, Alabama, when they were trotting out there the past few years. I mean, those are like that's the Pro Bowl, right? But I think receiver even has not been as important in this playoff as I thought it would be, because you had years where Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, of course, LSU with Burrow, unreal. But then even last year, right, when you had the reduced playoff, LSU had the 2 best receivers in the country and they didn't make the playoff. You did have Washington had really good ones. But yeah, I think offensive line, running game, defense has been the story of the playoffs, and that Miami's part of the way there, but there's a big missing piece, and they try to take a step to address that here with Hetherman.
Before we get to Hayden Lowe here, I wanted to talk about one thing, because there's a huge discussion in the comments going on right now about whether Ruben Bane is going to slide inside, because a lot of people have kind of just said that after the first few games of the year, when he was not healthy, that he didn't seem to have that same burst off the edge. I've always been, behind the idea of him playing inside, playing D tackle. I think he can play strength-wise with those guys inside. I think he's more of a weapon with that quickness inside to pair with that strength. And some people are saying in the comments, look, he put too much weight on. We said this the other day. He's wide. That's just naturally his body type. I don't think that this is, they tried to put too much weight on him. He's continuing to fill out his frame. He was a high school kid a couple years ago. He's a sophomore in college now. That's what's going to happen as he's in that weight room. What do you want him to do? Not pick up the weights? Just not going to happen. So that to me is just a natural move that I think should happen.
Yeah, I think you got to listen to the kid's body. It's like, and you got to this, Pete, which is, Chicolo was somebody, they just stuffed him up like a foie gras, like they were trying to, like a duck, trying to eat the foie gras. Like they were just feeding him. And he got too big, and it wasn't natural to his body. When he got to the NFL, he played at a different size. Perryman, same thing. James Williams was the opposite. He was so adamant about playing safety. You were constantly fighting his natural growth, keeping him lean, and it just didn't make sense. And then it got to the pros. He's 240 in a heartbeat. And he looks great. Physically looks great. He started, I believe, the last game of the year. So you got to kind of see, to me, forget need. Where is his body telling you to go from a position standpoint? And I think seeing him in the bowl game, again, I'm not a physiology expert, right? I'm not a strength and conditioning coach, but just seeing him from the stands, I said, wow. I mean, this dude looks big, and he's not a lazy guy. So that tells me that he's just growing. So if he's fighting to stay at 285, I say just go D-tackle. Don't fight. Don't swim upstream here. Let's figure out where you're going and then do everything we can to go in that direction.
And play to your strengths, right? This is not a guy who has length or like a tremendous amount of bend, right? But if he's playing inside, he's got a real quickness for the position. He has more than enough strength, I think, to hold up over there. Like, I think as an edge guy, he's going to win with power, and that's pretty much how it's going to happen, right? Not that he can't beat a guy with some burst off the edge, but like consistently, when you play the best of the best, like inside's going to be where I think he wins.
100%. 1,500 on the show. Remember to like and subscribe. Got a lot of comments here. T Love's asking, you delivered Islas Canarias to Hetherman yet? We got another comment, Brandon. What day are you taking Hetherman to get some Cuban food? Massachusetts native. He wants the best Cuban food in the world. He knows where to go, and that is Islas Canarias. It is the best Cuban restaurant in Miami, which means it is the best Cuban restaurant on planet Earth. Open for 40 years. It'll be waiting there for Hetherman when he wants to. He looks like a pretty in shape guy. He wants to put on some pounds, maybe add some mass. You can go out there. The portions are unreal. Pretty much eating for 2 days when you go there and get some steak.
He seems like a coffee guy, though. Like Cuban coffee is probably right up his alley.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And the palomilla there.
Oh, this is a man-sized portion at Islas Canarias. Of course, the classic croquetas. You can get the classic ham, which has been voted best croqueta in Miami a million times. You can get all different kinds of varieties if you want to experiment a little. Again, you can go to the locations out west, or if you're closer to UM, Dayland Mall, Dining Pavilion, Islas Canarias Express. You still got all the classics there, and it is right there in the food court, like literally high-end restaurant right there in the food court. Anthony Bourdain, if you guys are into the Food Network and all that stuff, he went all the way out west to go to Islas Canarias when he came to Miami for his Miami episode. If that doesn't tell you the level of cuisine we're talking about here, I don't know what to say. Islas Canarias, the absolute best in the business. I don't need to plug it anymore. The comments do it for me. So there it is, man. You guys are. I'll send you some residuals maybe.
Mark Chandler says send Hetherman and Motec. I went there the other day, man. The place was A1.
Oh yeah, Motec. They don't sponsor us, but yeah. I'm a big fan.
I'll give him a free plug. The place was fire.
I'm surrounded by Israelis all day. All my friends, my kids' friends in Miami Beach. Shout out to Orr. Yeah, Motec is the spot. That's definitely a good one. We'll see if we can get.
Want to cater for us, and we're here.
They've built like 17 new restaurants, so maybe they do need some advertising. Let's switch gears a little bit, Pete. Talking about high school, go pull up that huddle because I want to talk about a guy named Hayden Lowe. This is a signee. Talk about getting a fresh look at a roster. If you are Hetherman, there are different classes of players. There's the guys that you're seeing that played last year, and you watch them on film, then you see them in person. What can we do different with these guys? There is the transfers, which nobody's seen, but now they're into your program. And then there's the guys coming from the high school level. And Hayden Lowe is somebody that just generated a ton of buzz here at the Navy All-America game. Used to be the Army All-America game. Hayden Lowe, this is guys from LA, 4-star player, but he's pushing for 5-star status at least. He was named the top performer by On3 and 247. So this guy, everybody that was there said this guy was the stud of these practices, named Alpha Dog, again, by multiple publications. Measurement-wise, he was huge. So Best First Step Award, they just put this out right now. The Best First Step went to Hayden Lowe from 247. Excellent snap anticipation, able to move with a variety of different moves, stymieing opponents with an initial jolt. This is what I love. One of the youngest seniors in attendance and still growing into his long limbs. One thing, when you go look at these projections, age is a big part of that. So, when you're looking at at the age of the prospect. That's something to keep in mind, not just the year. By the way, I didn't even give Hayden Lowe the title here, Pete, which is the Beacon Adjusters Prospect of the Week. So let's get the love there for Hayden Lowe as the Beacon Adjusters Prospect of the Week. But as we continue to talk about him, just looking at what his measurements, I believe it was 6'4", 250 when he checked in. He was actually part of the all lobby team. So the all lobby team, just pulling up the measurements here. The all lobby team is, who looks good in the lobby. So when he pulled up, he was 6'5", 250 verified. These are not like, the coach filling in boxes on the sheet. This is what he's verified at: 6'5", 250, 10+ inch hands, 34-inch arms. Again, emerging as potentially a 5-star player, according to 247. You're watching some film here. His senior year was even better. He was one of the most productive players in the country as a senior, 16+ sacks. Same high school as Kayvon Thibodeau, who he's often compared to. I know internally they've said that this is that kind of player. When you're talking about first-round player, that's how they viewed him as. He talked a lot about how Miami, he was committed to USC, but he said Miami really treated him like the top of their board. There's a reason for that. This guy was at the top of their board. That was not fluff. They really wanted this guy. They recruited him that way. You see him here. You see the natural twitch and bend for a guy with those kind of dimensions, right? Sometimes those guys that are so big and developed in high school physically are stiff. He doesn't have that. He's a natural pass rusher plus the great measurements. He has the production, has the motor. I saw him in person in spring when he visited. I thought he was an NFL player. I was trying to figure out what alumni it was because I couldn't recognize the face. It blew my mind to hear he was a junior about to be a senior in high school. So he's coming this spring. I think he's one of the few enrollees that's not on campus already just because he was playing in the game. Again, he was a top performer consistently in that after having a great senior season with a great motor. So with that size, 250, you could see him playing right away. You saw Dylan Stewart playing. I'm not saying this guy's Dylan Stewart, but you talk about these 5-star ends that have size and power to step in and play. He could give you something right away, Pete.
Yeah, and that actually leads me into this comment by T-Love42. He says, D-Money, we heard the same thing about Lightfoot, and he sat the bench. Lightfoot and Booker Pickett, both of them who were really, really good at the end of the year there on the All-American circuit, were both really light and needed to add some weight. And they're both guys that people are very excited about inside the building still, but the size was not ready to play right away. I think that's the main difference here with Hayden Lowe.
Yeah, I mean, Lightfoot was small. You knew Lightfoot was going to need some time to gain weight. He still played on special teams on kickoff to show you how fast he was, but he needed weight. Lowe is physically much different. Look, if you're comparing a guy size-wise to Lowe and ranking-wise to Lowe, Ruben Bane, right? Ruben Bane was ranked in that 50 range, I think, on the on top 100, which is about where Lowe sits right now. Again, they're talking about bumping him up to that top 32, meaning first-round player, 5-star player. So we'll see if he gets that bump. But even where he is now, he's probably comparable in rating to Ruben Bane, and he's comparable in size to Ruben Bane. So if you're looking for a comp, I'm not saying he's going to come in here and win ACC Rookie of the Year, but one thing that allowed Ruben Bane to play earlier than a Lightfoot was just the physical size and the power and the ability to handle some of the bigger offensive tackles, which Lowe can do. And again, he's got a lot of momentum. It's not just a great week at Under Armour. He had a big-time senior year, one of the most productive defensive ends in the country. I heard, they have a database there at 247 where they keep track of everybody's senior stats. And they said this guy's one of the most productive defensive ends in their database just based on his senior stats. Comes from a program that's already produced a 5-star edge rusher to Mario Cristobal up at Oregon with Kayvon Thibodeau. It's not weak competition. They're playing out there in LA. Of course, LA's not produced the most defensive players lately, but talent is talent. And there's not that many guys 6'5", 250 with 34-inch arms, 10+ inch hands, high production, high motor, and big athleticism like Hayden Lowe brings to the table. Checks a lot of boxes. We haven't talked about him a ton because there were so many misses around that time. But this was a big hit in that 2025 recruiting class and a guy that we feel could play right away as your Beacon Adjusters Prospect of the Week. If your property's been affected by Hurricane Helene or Hurricane Milton or any other storm, Beacon Adjusters Group is here to help. With years of experience handling storm-related damage, we work tirelessly to ensure you get the compensation you deserve. From assessment to settlement, our team of trusted experts will guide you every step of the way. Don't face the aftermath alone. Let Beacon Adjusters Group restore your peace of mind. Call us today, 954-466-4224, 954-466-4224. storm damage, Beacon Adjusters Group. It's not just Florida, all across the country called that number. All right, what else we got going on here? A comment here. Hayden getting his 5th star soon. Oh, real quick, people, while you're looking for the next topic, a lot of talk about Lightfoot. One thing I would say that is underplayed, is not talked about enough. Lightfoot didn't go pro, didn't go in the portal. Justin Scott, all these other young guys, Booker Pickett,
Artavis Scott,
right? And not saying like
or Jones,
Blunt, yeah, all the young guys that you brought in at once didn't go in the portal. I'm not saying that was because there were rumors about them going in the portal, just because when you bring a lot of guys in the same position, they don't play a ton because there's veterans in front of them. Usually you'll lose a couple just by the natural attrition. And maybe that still happens after spring, but you have all these guys now, and you're going to get a spring to evaluate them and a new defensive coordinator come in and say, wow, this guy does what I need right here. I like this guy. This guy doesn't really fit, and really judge which of these young players fits into the future of a Hetherman defense.
Yeah, without a doubt. And this is, it's going to be interesting to kind of like see what he likes. Like you said, there's going to be guys who maybe didn't have huge roles this last year, whether it was because they were young or something else that fits into what he wants to do here.
100%. A lot of comments about the safety for Minnesota, Coy Parrish. I don't see that, him jumping and following his defensive coordinator. This is Minnesota's star safety, who's NFL player in a couple of years. I don't see that. He's from that area, small town. Minnesota's had really good safeties that have gone pro. Antoine Winfield on top of them. What's the guy they had this year? Nabin. They had another safety this year that was a pro. So I don't see that move. It's not like that he's like related to Hetherman in any way. I'm sure he loved him and he played well under him, but I don't see that being a candidate. I could be wrong, but I think he probably stays right where he is, which is his hometown team.
904 Hurricane asking, how many more transfers do you anticipate Miami taking? Do you mind running down a list of positions you expect Miami to address? I think receiver. We're all expecting one more receiver at least.
Yep.
Running back, maybe one more, a guy who could return as well. Offensive line, tight end, maybe one in those groups. And then defensively, maybe a linebacker, an edge guy.
And by the way, like and subscribe to this podcast. We got almost 1,700 on.
So, I mean, I don't know, but I'm talking after spring. I'm not talking right now. I think you could still have 5 to 6 more.
Yeah, I think here's the important thing to keep in mind about this is we don't know what's going to happen in spring. This is a new defensive coordinator, right? So I think you will see the team go through spring. Some guys will flash. Some guys will disappoint. Some guys will get hurt. Some guys will transfer. Hopefully not the ones you're trying to keep. When all that happens, now your needs could be a little different, right? Look, right now, I think Lyle and Fletcher, those are your running backs. Gerard Pringle's your third. Chris Wheatley Humphrey helping you out. You might say, well, coming out of spring, which I heard they will address running back coming out of spring, is that maybe you say, okay, we just need a fourth guy, maybe with some upside, maybe play special teams, and then if he needs to play, he plays. He maybe down the road guy.
Maybe a freshman who had their first semester at another school and is not going so well or something.
Right. But
that they liked last year.
God forbid something happens to a Fletcher, right? Or something happens to Lucas. Now you might need a higher caliber running back. So I think running back's one you keep an eye on coming out of spring, but it's going to depend on what spring looks like. On the defensive side, who steps up in this new defense? Who looks like a keeper? Who do we want to make sure has snaps, right? Because to me, I think the biggest need, if you're asking my personal opinion, would be a linebacker that's a true alpha dog, sideline to sideline, tip of the spear linebacker. If a guy like Aguirre or Wesley Basaint or Pruitt, who I know Miami really, really likes, or Adarius Hayes, the big linebacker from Largo, who we've seen do nice things, particularly in the run game. If one of those guys just blows up in this system, you might say, well, do we need to spend a ton of money to get a big name linebacker? Or the opposite, which is no one does that. And you say, man, this is a really big need. So I think that's something to watch. Defensive line, you got a lot of young guys you want to see play. So all those guys I said didn't jump in the portal. This spring's about seeing what those guys can do. Second year, third year in some cases, those guys got to play, right? You're paying them a lot of money. This is not intramurals. These guys, if you're getting paid that much, you're in your second year, you're playing, right? It's not, you don't have to wait till you're a redshirt freshman to play at the University of Miami if you're talented. So we'll see who can be an impact player there at that group. I think you could revisit that. I'm seeing some questions on Damon Wilson. I think that's the name that Miami likes and would potentially pursue.
That makes a lot of sense.
They had conversations
if they can get
with
him there.
Yeah, they've had conversations with him. So he's someone, Miami's in that conversation. We'll see where it goes. I know Missouri's in that mix. Texas is getting in that mix. Ohio State was a favorite at one point. So we'll see what happens with Damon Wilson. Miami likes him, and that could be a name to know. Or you could see that revisited after spring. Or after spring, you say, look, we got Bane. He's staying at end. Again, we'll see what happens with his body. Messidor's coming back. Maybe a Cole McConaughey has a great spring, or a Malik Bryant is more of a stand-up rusher. You don't know what these guys are going to do. Again, Lightfoot, all the other guys. Armando Blunt is a name that is not talked about enough with these positions. I think Armando Blunt's probably the most talented of all these guys on paper. We'll see how it translates to games. So, I think that's part of it is you will know more about what you need after spring.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why position-wise, I'm not ready to say this and that. I think Xavier Lucas, if he jumps in before spring, you'll see him added and he'll be on the team most likely. That'll be one. Luke Nichols' brother at tight end. I'm blanking on the name, Pete. Jake Nickel.
Jake,
right?
Yep.
Yeah, Jake Nickel from UAB, big blocking tight end. You could see him potentially getting on scholarship. He'll be here in spring. Miami could add another tight end depending on what happens. Does Elijah Lawton move to running back, which is something I've kind of pushed for? I think in the backfield, running back, fullback, occasionally, then also lines up and runs routes. That to me is a good role for Elijah Lawton. If that happens, you might need to add some more tight ends. Maybe Luka Gilbert and Brock Schott ball out, the two young tight ends you have. That'll impact your tight end room. So a lot of variables. One thing I can say for sure, I do think Miami gets another receiver to replace Restrepo, not just as a slot, but more as like your go-to guy.
Mm-hmm.
That I could see, and I expect to see, regardless of what it looks like in spring.
D, we're gonna wrap it up here in a few minutes, but I have a question here that I wanted to tee up for you. I know you enjoy this one. Son of the Beach says, "Do you see this defense being too basic for coaches like Belichick and others?"
I mean, Belichick, I don't know
what's gonna be good, guys.
I mean, I don't know what defenses were too basic for him without Tom Brady under center. I didn't see too many defenses that were too basic for Bill Belichick when he didn't have number 12. So yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem. I mean, who's his quarterback? I don't know. Who's the quarterback for UNC? Is it Brandon Baker, the true freshman? Is it the guy they got the backup from Purdue that went 2-10 or whatever? So yeah, Quinn Ewers, maybe if he wants to get split in half with all the 2-star offensive linemen they've added from the portal. That's not really what I'm worried about. I'm much more worried about, Kate Klubnik, right? Or probably more worried about Notre Dame, right? And what they're doing on the first game of the schedule. SMU, maybe DJ Lagway, if he can put it together. He's certainly got a ton of talent and some good weapons. We don't play North Carolina too. But I guess if you're talking about in the future, maybe he puts it together. That's not a team that I'm particularly concerned about. I have yet to see Belichick do anything without Brady as the head coach. And
quite frankly, it's been an underwhelming portal haul.
Portal haul. You're asking to play a different sport effectively with college football. He's learning on the job. He's old. Maybe it works, but that's
young soul though.
Yeah, definitely young something. But that's not my biggest worry in the ACC. I'm worried about Miami playing defense at an acceptable level. Clemson to me is the best returning team in the ACC, particularly in the offensive side of the ball. They made a big move on defense with Tom Allen, at defensive coordinator from Penn State, trying to do kind of what Miami's having trouble with, right? Stabilize that defense. They do bring back some good talent on offense. They do lose some talent on offense. They lose Brandon Stool at tight end. They lose Phil Moffitt at running back, but they have great young receivers, and Kate Klubnik's a really good player. So we'll see how that one turns out. But I think simple is fine. I mean, simple's fine if you have good athletes and guys that play hard and line up the right way and tackle and run to the ball. It's college football. You don't need to outsmart everybody. There's not a new game plan every single week like there is in the pros to that level. So simple, if the players execute and run fast and you're able to recruit talent to the scheme, simple is just fine.
All right, everyone, we appreciate you being on today's stream with us. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep it locked on CanesInsight.com as we continue. Yes, I see, D, you have something else to say.
Yeah, so you see the shirt. the polo. Got this one at the Miami Hurricane team store, MiamiHTS.com. If you are not local, if you're local, it's right across the street from the University of Miami, next to the Thesis Hotel. Pop in, tell them Canes Insight 20, whatever you want to tell them. They have a button for us, 20% off your first item. And if you're online, just use that promo code Insight20. You get 20% off your first item. Look at all this stuff. You got the basketball season in full swing. Teams might not be doing good. Lady Canes, tough one last night, but they're
I wouldn't call it full swing.
They're yeah, but the Lady Canes doing all right overall. I think they'll get a run here. The men's team, you were there front row. You had your reaction video was almost 1,000 views, by the way. Shout out to Jeremy, the best at the front desk, running the show at the Miami Hurricane team store. So you get the basketball gear.
They're giving those courtside seats away to me, man. That's how it's gone this year.
Touching wood was what you were saying?
Yeah, touching wood.
So Brandon asking what day for the baseball show. Sometime this week. I know I said that. I'm gonna get out to practice with my guy Sebastian Font, who played on the team this summer and has great insight into the team and the sport in general. Really smart guy. So we'll be doing the baseball show sometime this week. I just want to get to practice first. Practice started today's Monday. Practice started today. I'll get out there one of these days and I'll have the report. I was there all fall, so I saw pretty much every fall scrimmage with Sebastian. So we'll do a show, just kind of getting everybody ready for the season. It's ramping up. It's time. Excited for baseball. Hopefully do a lot better than basketball's done. But you get those post-game shows, Pete, for basketball. You're getting more views when we
lose. I threw some football stuff in there the other day because it was the day that Hetherman was hired. So I threw some stuff in there at the end. But, yeah, man, listen, Canes Cats Heat 305, you better watch out. Brandon said he's going to be the number one baseball fan on Canes Insight. So
there you go. Appreciate you, Brandon. Look, you did a great point here. We talked about this. If you can't execute lining up right, what difference does it make if the D is complex or simple? Couldn't have said it better. That was our problem this year. Alignment, communication, tackling, running to the ball, physicality. I mean, you can get into the X's and O's, and it goes a lot deeper than I can explain, but that I can see with eyes. And when I look at other teams that are succeeding on defense, there were things that you saw at Miami beyond talent, beyond scheme, that prevented us from playing a defense that would be at the minimum level to compete in the college football playoff.
All right, guys, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Keep it locked on CanesInsight.com. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Go Canes.